Ochoyo sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pege drolo zampe zebrache pande lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha saneka Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Oma guru vajra sumati munisha saneka Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Oma guru vajradara sumati munisha saneka Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Om guru vajradara sumati munisha saneka Uta vardani shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi Hakyuke kudan dagi alu Pakyuke sundan dagi ngam Pakyuke tukdan dagi Tün yerme çıktı çingi alu Makyuke kudan dagi lu Makyuke sundan dagi Makyuke tukdan dagi Tün yerme çıktı çingi lo Sashi pöge çukşi medo chan ravlin shi nide gembadi Sangye shindu mikte ulvargi drugunamda shinla che parasho Ye damang guru ratna mindrala kam niryatayami Sangye chedan soge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapso chi Dagi jinso gibe sonam king Drola pinchra sangye druparasho Sangye chedan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapso chi Dagi jinso gibe sonam ki Drola pinchra sangye druparasho Sangye chedan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapso chi Dagi chishe gibe sonam ki Drola pinchra sangye druparasho Nel Buddha, nel Dharma,
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Haye ke da ludana jinke rubunda nami ke namdan ruwa kunge dhanam che tsampa thamche ke to dagi che ten.
So now we pick up the sixth of the 7-point mind training. I'd like also to take advantage to remind you, some time ago we made this booklet with this greenish cover. It was that we've named Method and Wisdom to Realize Inner Peace, 4 practices of Lojong mind training, where I put 4 of the most important teachings that exist relative to mind training Lojong. I've always thought that this book for me, I wouldn't exchange it for anything. And if I were to abandon these texts, if I were to give up this text in exchange for something else, I just wouldn't do. These are texts that have been transmitted for centuries, protected and handed down. Many great sages have followed these steps. And so those of you who don't have this booklet, I invite you to get it and to read it, to reread it again, and to really protect it. So now let's go back to the 6th point of the 7-point mind training. I'll get right to the point, since we have a lot to say. We saw quickly the first 3 called Chitung Sung La Tak La. So Taktu means always, Lapa means to train, to train constantly in the 3 generalized meanings. These three generalized meanings are understood as not abandoning the commitment you've taken, not giving up the commitment that you've given. And here we need to have clarity of the commitment we've taken. So first we need to understand what our commitment is, what direction we've set for ourselves. But this first point is about not forgetting your objectives. Our main objective is inner peace. Not just for us, but as a way to put ourselves to be of service to others. Just look at just look at today's world, full of conflicts and wars, problems, economic problems, environmental problems, war. These all come from selfishness, from hate, from anger, from dissatisfaction. Basically, in the end, they come from the ignorance of human beings. So when one reaches a deep state of peace, it's an investment. It's an enormous support for everyone around them. So our objective is to reach this inner peace. In some cases, it's called nirvana. We can give it many different names. For ourselves, but also for others. Because the best we can give to others is a state of peace, wisdom, and love. This is the best thing that we can give to this society, to our world, to our objective. The first objective says, the first commitment says, it doesn't matter what happens. Remember where you want to go. Don't give up. Don't abandon your commitment. For example, there are many rules that help you get where you want to get, and that first rule is don't forget where you're going. So if I'm walking on my path and then I forget where I'm going, probably I'll end up somewhere else. So this is the first point. Don't forget. Don't go in the opposite direction of the objective you've set for yourself. The second point, don't feel better than others, but at the same time, don't think that because you are training your mind, transforming your mind, that you have superpowers. I've known people who had this kind of attitude. We have a body, like everyone else. We live in a normal context. We need to respect our body and the context in which we find ourselves. And then we have just an example came. No, it's not necessary to talk about it. The third, don't be partial. The practice should be applied in all places and in all contexts, and we shouldn't train where it's convenient. It's something that should be applied in every moment. This means that our spiritual path is present in our home, within our family, at work, etc. So this is the third commitment. The fourth, transform your attitude, but maintain your natural behavior. Rangsor means your form, your external way of showing yourself. So, yes, change your mind, change your inner attitude, your being, but don't show it. You don't need to show the world you're doing it. So if I live in a cultural context of a certain type, I need to respect it. The way I dress, the way I interact with people. I'm part of society, and I shouldn't say, okay, you're all going in one way, I'm following another direction because I practice mind training. So to show that I do strange things, I dress strangely. I mean, it could be beautiful things, but somehow I'm highlighting that I'm taking a different road. Instead, if our inner transformation, there are natural changes come about, okay, that works. But the danger here that we should avoid is wanting to impose on others somehow. Our changes show that we're different. We don't need to show anything to anyone. I think that this is quite clear. I was reading. I have been reading this book by Seneca in these days, and there's a passage where he talks to a disciple where he says, transform your inner attitude, but keep your behavior as society accepts. So you don't have to show anyone your inner changes. And one of the important points of this commitment is that there's a very subtle line here. It's dangerous. There's a kind of trap. So on one side is very beautiful. On the other side, there's this danger, which is to be along a deep, sincere path of inner transformation, but also feed one's ego as being seen as the one who is on the path, spiritual path. When I need to show to others that I'm here doing this, what happens is I start feeding my ego. I feed my ego with this behavior. And then we go towards another vow that's further ahead, which is don't transform gods into demons. Don't transform your spiritual practice where your objective is to abandon your selfishness by doing something that actually increases it. So we should have an attitude towards others where we don't need to show that we're different or better. We do our practice, but without imposing or without trying to show that we're different or better than others. All right? I think that's really clear. The next says, The fifth one. Don't speak of others' incomplete qualities. Nyangla nyampa in its characteristics. Nyampa instead means so degenerated, incomplete. Jumicha means to talk, so don't talk about incomplete qualities and refers to others. In other words, don't criticize others. Why does it come to want to criticize others? I think for two reasons. One's to feel better ourselves. The other one is worse off, and I highlight, that I'm not so bad off. Looking at him. That's one reason. Another reason is to try to create some kind of closeness to someone else. What we talked about this morning. So to create a kind of friendship with you. Then I try to look for a common enemy. So I criticize someone. And by talking badly of someone, and so with that criticism towards someone else, we find something that we share, and then this creates a kind of union, a kind of closeness. But what happens is aversion, as a feeling, generates gradually resentment, hate, violence, aggression, as well as dissatisfaction, anxiety, and fear. Are these things that we want? These are things that we want to avoid. The more I criticize something or someone, the more I start seeing that person through those eyes. And not only do we start nourishing our own resentment or indifference or anger, or arrogance, etc., but we also influence other people to do the same. And in the end, we just harm ourselves. But if we look, are we used to criticizing, or is it something that happens rarely? Unfortunately, it's a national sport. As we see, if this problem didn't exist at the time of Buddha or Atisha, they wouldn't have written it here. Remember, that these commitments were written in the 11th century in Tibet. So we're human beings. And someone might say, oh, it's normal. What does it mean? Oh, because it's normal, it's okay? In the 12th century. What's the definition of normal? Normal means that for me, to say it's normal, somehow it reflects my expectations of how it should be. We all do it, so it's normal. But we shouldn't. But the real question is, this interaction, does it bring a virtuous transformation or a non-virtuous transformation? Does this bring a transformation that sustains joy, happiness, and peace, and diminishes suffering, or does it increase suffering? This is the fundamental question. So I agree that it would be abnormal to not criticize. How beautiful to not be normal if that is what we say is normal. But the fundamental question is, what behavior generates a state of well-being, and what behavior generates the opposite, suffering? So the value of something is completely relative. For example, if we have a lot of time together or just a little bit of time together, what determines whether we have a lot of time together or a little bit of time together, the quantity of days or hours together, or the value that we attribute based on a comparison. So what determines if something's a lot or a little? It's an attributed value that we give. Someone might say, "Oh, only a weekend together," and now I haven't been to Brazil in 3 years. What are they're going to say? They're saying it's a lot. I mean, it's all relative. So big and small. If it's a lot, if it's a little, it's many aspects that are completely relative based on the value that we give. So what happens is, even when an example of this is interesting, it would be money. At the end of the day, money, other than being just printed paper or numbers on a screen, what is money? Something on which most of us who live in the same context, we attribute a similar value, to which we attribute a similar value. And once we attribute a similar value, we give that value to it. If at a certain point we stop doing so, would that object keep sustaining that value? No. When I talk about this, I can't help but remembering when the Prime Minister Modi in India, at a certain point, he took a radical move without getting into the economic aspects of it. From 8 p.m. he went on national television and he declared that by midnight all banknotes, so let's say if we were talking euros, it would be 20 euros and above, then from midnight on, from anything over 20, let's say euros, would have no value. And people had 1 month to bring one had a month to take that money to the bank, and one could put in like 1,500 euros worth of money into the bank after 1,500 euros worth of Indian money, if they didn't actually justify where that money came from, there would be a huge fine. And it was crazy because people were literally dumping money into the street, into rivers. So something that had enormous value, once we stopped giving value to that, it meant nothing. There were animals eating it in the street. I mean, so the value is not intrinsic, it's the value is given by us. Now, when we complain, when we criticize someone, we take value away from that thing. So the more I criticize where I live, the more dissatisfied I am with the place I live. The more I criticize someone, the more dissatisfied I will feel with the relationship I have with that person. As we said many times, the more I criticize, the more I complain, the more dissatisfied I am, and the more dissatisfied I am, the more I suffer. The more I thank, the more I rejoice, the more satisfied I am, and as a consequence, the happier I am. So this is one of the most important vows, commitments. I take the commitment to not criticize. I stop complaining, which doesn't mean not seeing things that we don't think are going right. I can see things that I think are not going well, but there's a fundamental point here. If I see something that's not going right, I can talk about it, but with one condition, that it's positive criticism. How can I interact with that problem to be part of the solution and not simply remain there with my finger pointed at the problem. Because let's remember, so pointing our finger at the darkness doesn't take away the darkness. Putting energy into the light takes away the darkness. Oh, he did this, and that one did that, and he shouldn't do like that. He can't do like that. Well, if he did it, it means that he can. I totally agree that it would be better if he didn't. What can we do so that that he doesn't do that anymore? For many years, it would happen. It would happen sometimes that people would come to me with problems that they had, or two people, for example. Maybe there's a conflict between two people, and both would come to me. But if you come to me to talk about your problem with someone else, I'll try to talk to you about what you can do to be better in faced with that conflict. I'm not going to talk to you about what the other should do or could do, because we can spend hours and days and months talking about someone else, but that's not going to change that person. So you come to me to talk about someone else, and I'll talk to you about you, and the other one comes to me to talk about the other, and I talk to that person about him, and then in the end, so both come, and then they say, no, you're on the other one's side, and I'm not on anyone's side. I'm on everyone's side. I'm on the side of harmony. Let's try to help each other. But when we're faced with something that we don't like, that we don't agree with, the point isn't showing the world what's wrong, but it's about being part of the solution. If highlighting something that's not going well, if that helps the people not put energy into that thing, then that's part of the solution. That's fine. Nothing keeps us from talking about our own experience where it's necessary. For example, if I need someone to cook or drive me, and that person drives for me and doesn't drive well, I have a bad experience with that person as a chauffeur, and then later someone says, "Oh, I need someone to drive." What do you think about that person who drove for you? At that point, what do I say? I say my experience was not positive, and it's I don't need to add adjectives or go into the details about it, here, there, and everywhere. No, it ends there. I don't need to pick up my shotgun and shoot. And so it's an exercise, and I put a little bit of emphasis here because this commitment would make this commitment would change greatly one's mind. And if one upholds this commitment, one will have a lot of free time. And I wanted to just praise my paternal grandparents who are still alive. They're in their late 90s. Up until just a few years ago, they traveled a lot, and I've been with them a couple times. They like talking. I never ever heard them talk about others. They came here to Lake Maggiore, and my grandmother came here and told me why it's called Lake Maggiore, why the name is Verbania, and then she had breakfast with this person. I can't remember her name. Was like Sophia. And she says, "Oh, like the princess such and such." I mean, they could talk about any subject, and when they didn't agree, Grandpa would go online on Google, and then my grandmother would call her sister, and her sister's husband was a direct disciple of Einstein. I mean, it was like a walking encyclopedia she was, and so she would call her sister, and then they would talk about it. My grandparents. It's about having this aspect of curiosity, of wanting to learn. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We don't need. Oops. Let's remember that being in silence with someone is a great act of intimacy. To be together in silence. That's beautiful, to relax. Instead, in our culture, when we're with someone, we feel like we have to talk. So let's really try to put this commitment into practice, to not talk of other people's incomplete qualities. I say this for an important reason. I never talk about politics. It's not something that attracts me much. I've seen that for the last couple years, I don't know for how long, the way to play with the attraction and aversion of people, especially during election campaigns, is not about the electoral program, what they want, what the politicians want to do. Instead, it's all about criticizing the other party. Let's try really not to be mixed up in that. If someone wants to fight, that's his problem. We shouldn't let ourselves be manipulated in on such a low level in this game of attraction and aversion. Is that clear? Sometimes I remember criticism towards certain politicians, and I'm thinking, have you ever seen this person? Have you ever had a direct experience with this person? Why do you have so much to say against this person? For what I've heard said or what I've seen, when instead we don't realize that we are so heavily manipulated. So each one needs to vote for based on what one thinks is the best for one's own country. And don't even criticize those who criticize. Oh, I never criticize anything, but look at this other person who criticizes, never stops criticizing. We shouldn't criticize nor criticize those who criticize. And here we get to the sixth commitment. So making Shencho Chai. So here it says, don't concern yourself with others' business, but we can say Shen means others, Chok means direction, like other people's business, Kayang, any, Misamo, don't think about anything that has to do with others, which doesn't mean don't think of others or the needs of others. It means to don't fill your mind as don't entertain yourself with what people do or what they don't do. Oh, did you see? Who is that person really with? Oh, did he cheat on her or did she cheat on him? Who cares? Mind your own business. Life is so precious, and instead we're filling up our life with things that bring us no benefit at all. Also, because when we gossip and talk about other people's lives, what are the subjects that we talk about? Objects like to rejoice about? Do we say, oh, did you see that person? How wonderful she's able to be so kind. Oh, look at that couple. They they're so harmonious. I wish that that I could be like that too. Instead, what are our subjects of gossip? Objects of aversion and objects of attraction. Objects that feed jealousy, envy, aversion, fear. Things that we don't want to nourish. So, to fill up our inner space that is so precious, we should. So let's not fill up that space with things that are not beneficial. So we shouldn't not just not criticize, but also not fill our minds with what people should or shouldn't do. Oh, look, you you said you were going to do this and you shouldn't do that. And he did that. And why didn't he do this other thing? This is just none of my business. Instead, if I want to waste my life, we're free to act. But what Geshe Chekawa is saying is we shouldn't take up our inner space with things that don't bring benefit. And not only, they actually nourish attraction, desire, aversion, envy, jealousy, fear. We should take care of others in the sense of feeling love and compassion for others. And this is similar to the previous commitment. I shouldn't criticize others, but I should put my energy towards the solution. So ask myself, how can I serve you best so that you can get out of your suffering? So I need to know you so that I can help you, sure. Is that difference clear? For me, sincerely, the fifth and the sixth is enough for a lifetime.
In qualche modo ci intratteniamo con la vita degli altri, addirittura ci intratteniamo con la vita di gente che non esiste. Le telenovele, le serie, le cose. Ma tu non sai cosa ha fatto lui l'altro giorno? Ma sta parlando di un personaggio, di un qualcosa che non c'è mai stato. O no? Almeno come faceva.
Like once there was a master who came in at the beginning of the 1960s, Geshe Chekawa. I never knew him. And it's said that I never knew him. It's said that he would spend hours in front of the TV, and as he would watch TV, he would find examples of teachings. He would say, "Oh, look at how jealousy works." And then he would find all of the examples of the teachings. Something else is this attitude that we have to fill up our space with other people's lives, somehow to forget our own. We talk about stories, and stories are wonderful, and they have tremendous power to direct ourselves, to shape our paradigm. Stories are important and they should be told. Nothing against telling stories. I think this is highly worthy. But also here, One thing is talking about transmitting points of view and stories and gradually formulate our worldview. Like the stories that are told to children have tremendous power, but at a certain point it's pure entertainment, where at a certain point we get into this passive state where we're simply receiving without having to interact much, and we fill up our space with things that never happened. Someone invented and told this story, made this representation. Once I was watching a movie at a certain point, I realized that I was generating aversion towards one of the characters, and I thought, what am I doing? This can't be true, because they play with our most basic psychology. So we need to be really careful about what feeling we want to nourish. So starting with the people around us, those that we deal with daily, we shouldn't criticize them, but instead try to be part of the solution. We allow everyone to follow their own path, make their own choices, and we shouldn't mind other people's business, but instead we offer our life to support others. Is that clear? The specific vow is about not minding other people's business. Let's go on. Number 7. Train to counter whichever disturbing emotion is greatest. Which is greatest in the sense that is the strongest. So when we observe ourselves, we should observe our conditionings, our attitudes that are not healthy, and try to avoid them, try to counteract them. Where should we start? Which mental defilement? Because we have so many. The strongest one, the greatest one, where we see our weakest point. Is it anger? Is it laziness? Is it sadness? Is it this sense of abandonment? Is it arrogance? Is it miserliness? No, I have so many, but what's the greatest one, the strongest one? And that's the one we need to start with. So don't be afraid to look at ourselves. Don't be afraid to look at yourself in the mirror. And we say, let's start here. And the others will come one after the other, remembering that we shouldn't expect to resolve everything right away. We do little by little. We're kind with ourselves. We gather up our problems, and we little by little we put energy into the solution. The key is, first of all, not feeding our negative our negative habits. So if it's criticism or dissatisfaction or anger or arrogance or wherever it is, I recognize my strongest disturbing emotion, and I start by not feeding it. How do I do that? In reality, this comes after. I'm not sure if I should open this door just now, because in the next part, there's one that says, it's 7.6. This is train in the 3 difficulties, and this is how to face actually our disturbing emotions. I'm going to leave that for later. So the point is, here the point of this commitment is, where I see aspects that are not healthy, I try to see the strongest one, the strongest disturbing emotion within, and I gather up my courage and my strength, and I say, I'm going to start here. And then it says, and then I'll talk more about this in that next section, not as a commitment, but as one of the precepts. So train to counter whichever disturbing emotion is greatest, the strongest. Just going to see in the commentary what it says. Here, then, we need to apply the antidote, be aware where we see our strongest disturbing emotion. What does this mean? Our ability that we all have to cultivate, to put energy, and to have self-awareness. Because to do this, we need we need to have awareness of our own thoughts, our words, our actions, see ourselves. So when we talk about disturbing emotions, we're talking about our behavior of body, speech, and mind. And where we see that we have behavior that's not positive, we need to be able to be aware of it and stop feeding it. Stop. It's tiring. It's very tiring. Why? Because these are habits. But the vow isn't about, okay, stop doing everything that's negative. No, the vow is recognize the strongest of your disturbing emotions and start working there. Don't set that one aside. The next point. 8. This is hard. Give up every hope of reward. Give up every hope of reward with reference to your own spiritual practice. So I go to recite mantras, or I meditate, or study philosophy or teachings of Lojong, etc., and I try to apply it into my daily life. I expect something, don't I? Yeah. Okay, Lama, I've been doing this for so long and it's not working. I'm still here. It still happens this and that. My life hasn't changed. It's actually gotten worse, as if it were the fault of the practice. Someone's come to me and said, you know, Buddhism doesn't work. I've been practicing for so many years, and I'm the same. I've seen two different cases, and one, you ask the person, okay, you've been practicing for many years, so is it many years that you are calling yourself a practitioner, or have you been practicing for many years? I mean, one thing is being part of a group of people, and I learn how to do certain recitations, meditations, and I entrust myself to my spiritual guide, and I identify myself as being Buddhist. Another thing is using that in my daily life to look at myself in the eyes, face my mental defilements, change my habits, and really put myself in the game. These are two different things. So in some cases it happens, but nothing's changed, someone would say. But the question is, did you practice? Did you put into practice the advice that was given to you? The second is one says, "Oh, I've been practicing for many years and I don't see any benefit." But then I ask, "Well, are you more patient than you once were?" Yes. Or you do suffer for the same things you did in the past? No. Do you have more awareness of what you do? Yes, of course. Well, then, of course, it's working. But the person says, but I'm still suffering. Well, it took Buddha 3 eons. No, it's not for nothing that Buddha Shakyamuni talked about needing 3 eons to get out of suffering. 1 eon is a very, very, very long time. I don't know exactly. Also because the translation of eon is not even the right one. Kelpe Jampa Sung. It's a period of time that's used in Tibetan Buddhism, but comes from the Vedic world, where they talk about kalpas, these aeons, and there are different types of eons. Longer, and Tangmen is the longest of all. It's the countless eon. It's like 3 countless eons is what is said. And time is relative. But the point is, it's not something that's immediate. It's not from one day to the next. So where it's said to abandon, to give up every expectation, hope of reward, so walk towards the horizon without the expectation of getting anywhere in a certain amount of time, because the more expectations we have, the more we will suffer, because the path is gradual. And so we also give up the hope or expectation of receiving any kind of recognition or material gain, etc. Sometimes we can fall into the trap of saying, oh, for many years I've been doing this and no one recognizes my effort. Or it's normal, it's not, but it's not beneficial. This need that we have to want to be recognized for the effort that we put in. You know, and here it says to not have these expectations. You know, in the monastic context, it's worse because it's a kind of career. You know, one has recognition. You know, one does. Has a certain curriculum, a certain path, and then expects some kind of recognition. Instead, here it says to give up any expectation of getting something back. We're along this path because we want to be at the service of others. The real reward that we should look for is being able to help others in the best way possible, to put ourselves at service, and it'll be wonderful. We are on our path because we want to be of service to others. We want to support others. It's subtle. It's not easy. It's not, oh, I've taken the vow or one says, I can't take this vow because I have this expectation. No, we have it all a little bit, and gradually we should stop feeding this mind. This reminds me of something kind of nice. I remember once Geshe Rinpoche was here, and different people were coming to greet him, and some people came to him. It's really quite Western. Say, oh, Rinpoche, I did this retreat, that retreat, and talking with him, chatting a little bit, and laughing a little bit. I said, why do you come to me and tell me you've done a retreat? Good for you. You've had a retreat. Why are you coming to me to tell me you've done a retreat? Do you need a pat on the shoulder? Did you do a retreat to be recognized, or because you want to familiarize yourself with the practice? He would say, you know, people come and tell me this. I say, "Oh, thank you, good job." But sometimes we have this desire to be recognized because of those various containers that we talked about before. There's where that feeling of not feeling loved or recognized, we do everything possible to get that. So instead, in a spiritual context, sometimes even in a spiritual context, we do things because we want to be accepted, we want to be liked, we want to be recognized, but that's not the right motivation. It's fine to be recognized, but this is not the objective for which we do what we do, especially on the spiritual path. Okay, good. Let's go forward. Let's go. Number 9, which is connected to the one before. It says, avoid poisonous food. Avoid poisonous food. Tukchengi sekpa. Tuk means poison. Chen has. Se is food. Pan is to abandon. So avoid poisonous food. Food is something should nourish us. Food should give us energy. Gives us energy and nourishment. What happens when the food that should nourish us is actually poisoned? It kills us. It makes us sick. It hurts us. So avoid poisonous foods means avoid something that should normally nourish us, but because it's poisonous, it harms us. And this makes reference to spiritual practices that should be good for us. Mantra recitation, meditation, the study of philosophy, the conduct of certain moral conduct, that these theoretically at the basis, these are things that should nourish our path. But when they're poisoned by our selfishness and become a means to feed our ego, at that point it's a poisonous food. So avoid poisonous food. It's similar. Well, once there was a master called Geshe Ben-Kungel. I'm a huge fan of Geshe Ben-Kungel. He was someone very direct in his life. He had a past. Wasn't a spiritual path. He was like a mafia boss in the northeast of Tibet. In the region of Kham, where they're also very strong. There's a kind of proverb that says a man that doesn't know how to kill is not a real man. They don't negotiate. They just pick up, a pistol to talk. The kind of far west, the Tibetan far west, and today it's still like that. In a few years ago, you could see people going around with long swords. Once we were there with Lama Ganchen and we wanted to go somewhere, but there was a kind of local war over mushrooms because it's a region that has a lot of porcini mushrooms, and there's a huge exportation into Japan, so it's a very important for them. And at a certain point, one village said that a part of the woods belonged to them, and they started fighting. And this happened when we were there, so they said it's better not to go there because of this conflict between them. Just to say that these are peoples that are very direct, and many great masters have come from this area. They're very true people. They don't have this thing of saying one thing and thinking another. I mean, it would be very hard to find a kampa who looks at you, smiles at you, and then talks behind your back. No. That's a classic of central Tibet. You know, to say something, you need to say something else. It was always hard for me to figure that out. In any case, Ben Kungal came from this region, and he was very strong and direct. And at a certain point, he decided to abandon this criminal life, and he follows his spiritual monastic life. And at a certain point, he was on retreat. He was in a kind of mountain hut, a kind of cave, kind of hut, and in front of him he had his altar. And every day he would make his water bowl offerings. He knew that day his sponsor, the one that sponsored his food, and he was coming that day. And knowing that this person was coming, what did he do? He cleaned a little bit more. He made offerings that were more beautiful than normal. He made them better than he normally did because his sponsor was coming. You know, he couldn't show him that he had to show him he was a good practitioner. And so he made everything beautiful, and he sat down. And then looking towards the altar, he asked himself, but who are these offerings for? These are offerings to my selfishness, to my ego, not to construct something virtuous, but to feed my own ego. And at that point, he took the dirt. He was in a kind of cave. He took the actual dirt, and he threw it all on his altar, and he just got everything dirty. Then he sat down, and he stayed sitting with his face a little bit with a kind of a frown. And the sponsor came, saw everything dirty, and he came to talk to him. He didn't greet him. He saw him just there, you know, closed up. Then this man went to his master, who had given him this task. And he said, I don't want to support this man. The altar was totally dirty. He didn't even greet me. Nothing was set up correctly. And then the master said, no, explain to me, how was it? And he said, there was dirt on the he was dirt on the ground, and the master said, oh, Kyapsuchi. And he started laughing a little bit. He said, the offering that Ben Kungal made today is the most beautiful of offerings, because he made the offering of going against his own selfishness, his own ego. It's about having the strength of recognizing that sometimes things we're doing, like in that case, setting up the offerings, trying to be kind, because one wants to get something in return. One wants to nourish one's own ego. So once he realized that his food was poisoned, he went against it, and that's not easy to do. Often we say, yes, it's poisonous food, okay, but the taste is still really good. You know, oh, it's just a little bit of why, it's not such a big deal. Instead, when we see that happening, it needs to be avoided. And in our spiritual practice, this can happen very easily. At a certain point, we accumulate mantras. Why do we have to tell anyone? You know, I did 2 million mantras. At a certain point, we can say it as a way to rejoice, but be careful what's happening inside. So, if at a certain point we see that we're doing spiritual practice, meditation, or conduct, or studying philosophy, and that is serving as a way to feed our desire to have for desire for recognition or for to feed our ego, then that absolutely should be abandoned. Is that clear? Number 10. Don't maintain misplaced loyalty. What does that mean? Misplaced loyalty means being loyal to that which should be abandoned, like our bad habits or our mental defilements. Oh, okay. Oh, we say, okay, but that I'm just made like that. I know it's not a good habit, but it's just something small. And we try to protect something that is harmful in our life in general. Beyond our spiritual practice, there are things in our life that are harmful, but somehow we protect them, right? So unhealthy relationships, behavior that's not good for us, and somehow we cultivate them, we protect them. We are loyal to sadness, to anger, or loyal to dissatisfaction, to criticism. We're loyal to an unhealthy lifestyle. So to don't maintain misplaced loyalty means don't be loyal or sustain something that is harmful to us. It's not always easy because often, very often, situations or the things that we live are not black and white or white and black. There are many shades of gray. And in those shades of gray, one of the clearest is the 4 types that we were talking about before, 4 types of objects, interactions. We talked about this before. There are interactions that are pleasurable, that are beneficial. There are pleasurable interactions that are harmful. There are displeasurable interactions that are beneficial, and ones that are actually that are also harmful. So if it's good for us or bad for us means that it brings well-being. If something of these 4, we need to work on 2 most of all, because the pleasurable things, naturally we're attracted to them. So what is pleasurable and is good for us, we don't need to worry about, because naturally we're attracted to it, right? It's pleasurable and it's good for me. Instead, the unpleasant things that are not good for us, we don't need to worry about that either, because we will have natural aversion. Instead, we need to pay attention to the things that are pleasant but are bad for us, and we need to be careful also about the things that are pleasurable but that are harmful. And it's tiresome. So here where it says to not maintain misplaced loyalty, so don't be loyal to that which is pleasurable but harmful. For example, eating something that we know is bad for us but we like. Why should I keep eating something that I know is bad for me? Because I like it. But my priority isn't about me liking it or not. It's about whether it's good for me or not. So don't be loyal to that which is harmful to us. And we can see this related to our physical contact, the way we eat, the relationships we have with other people, our own verbal conduct, our lifestyle, our mental, and getting all the way to our thoughts and our deepest feelings. But you need a certain courage and strength. So we need to remember this. When we see that there is something that is bad for us, in spite of it being pleasurable, we should not protect it because we love ourselves. Just a little bit. No. Okay, just once. No, so, the big doesn't exist without little, a little bit here, a little bit there. And someone would say, oh, but Lama, you don't live the life that I do. I say, you want to exchange? I'm not pointing my finger at anyone. I'm sharing guidelines for our lives. And where we see that there's something that is bad for us, and we've seen it, we've experienced it, it's clear to us on a mid-long term. This thing should be avoided, it should be abandoned without excuses. Because when we start, taking a little bit here and a little bit there, a little bit like this relationship with alcohol, maybe. There are two different approaches when we talk about drinking alcohol. So one says, okay, one shouldn't get drunk, or an approach that says shouldn't drink anything. For example, I remember once a Theravada monk normally are very rigid, and he was there with his glass of wine. What was he doing? And he said, no, my vow says I shouldn't get drunk. Everything is interpretable. That was his interpretation. Lama Tsongkhapa said instead, one should not drink even the quantity that could fill this gesture, this little gesture with the thumb, 2 drops, let's say. So not even 2 drops one should drink. Changi, neba, kungi. Alcohol is the door, is the gateway to all negative actions, because we're made of habits, and when we're in control of our senses, when we're in control, then we can say, okay, this is, we can monitor our behavior. But instead, when we lose the control of our when we lose control, then we can do very, very harmful and stupid things. So in this here, it depends on your level of it depends on how familiar you are with your moral conduct, because that's the point, is to be able to maintain your conduct, your moral conduct. So everyone needs to see for himself, and where we see that there are habits that are not good for us, the real problem of doing a little bit of what we like but that is harmful is that somehow one justifies 2, which justifies 3, which justifies 4, and little by little we keep that habit. We're faithful to that negative habit. We shouldn't eliminate every habit that's harmful from one day to the next. We should respect our ability to change. But we shouldn't stay still either. What's harmful is harmful. What's good for us is good for us. Okay? And I'm not here to tell you what is good for you, what is bad for you. Each one needs to see for himself. This isn't our subject for today. Just to be clear that I opened clear about what we talked about before, the use of alcohol, for example, I don't think that it's, wrong totally wrong for everyone. I think the real danger that I see is, you know, one thing is getting drunk and losing control of oneself, and then on another level, we can say that it can create a kind of um, of it can create an addiction, and I'm totally against any kind of addiction. And then also, it can create a kind of foggy mindedness. I remember there was a person who drank just a certain amount of alcohol daily, and then that person stopped, and after a week, and after so many years, the person said, I didn't know that my mind was so fogged up. I thought that that was a normal state of being. I wasn't drunk, but at the same time, I had I had a mind of non-clarity, a foggy mindedness, and and then and then sometimes people can also use alcohol as a refuge, and one uses alcohol or any other substance as a way to relax, to 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 move away from one's own conflicts and problems, and by not facing them. Nothing against having fun or doing something that one likes to do. The problem is when that pleasure brings problems mid and long term. Okay, I don't want to. I, people, make your own choices. People come, oh, Lama, can I drink a glass of wine at night? I'm not here to tell you what you should do or shouldn't do. Each one needs to look for himself and see what kind of effects that behavior has on oneself. The next one, number 11. Don't make sarcastic remarks. Don't make sarcastic remarks. Normally, when we use sarcasm, what's the tendency? We're supporting someone, or are we highlighting weaknesses? Normally, it's to highlight others' weaknesses. Often, sarcastic remarks are a way to set ourselves higher than someone else. But the question is, that act, that remark, what does it nourish inside of me? So comments that feed aversion or arrogance, it's something we want to avoid, because the key point of the Lojong practice is about cultivating altruism, compassion, and love. In other words, sarcastic remarks, is it something we would do for ourselves? I mean, would we say that about ourselves? Often not. So why should we use that way of speaking towards someone else? We should not try to highlight someone else's weakness or a difficulty, or anything that's not beautiful in someone else. So if we see someone who's having trouble or is something that's not good, then we should try to help him. Once a journalist asked Lama Ganchen, "What's your secret? Why do you have so many friends?" And Rinpoche answered, "I have so many friends because I relate to them. I relate to the qualities of everyone and not through their defects." And it's true. Once Rinpoche was talking about this when he met for the first time Ducho. Many of you know him, who has painted many. Here behind, there's the image of Sarasvati, or the painting of Lama Ganchen with Jesus and Buddha. Many paintings. And in the mid 80s, Lama Ganchen was teaching at the Lama Tsongkhapa Institute in Pomaya, and he was there. And then at a certain point, this boy, Ducho, went to Lama Ganchen and offered him a painting that he had made, a tanka, a sacred Buddhist image. And Lama Ganchen looked at it and he said, "Wonderful. Can you do another one?" But and but he asked him a different divinity. He commissioned another painting, and when Lama talks about this story, he said it wasn't at all nice, but he saw a potential in him. Instead of saying, "Oh, it's horrible, just drop it," he said, "Good job, do another one. But maybe look here. Here you can make this a little bit better." The next one, Rinpoche said it was better than the previous one, but was still far from being good. He said, "Do another one," and gradually, until he actually became his personal tanka painter, and he had just going to take advantage to make a little advertising for Ducho, because he is as profession, he is a painter. I don't know what the waiting list is, but he's really very good. And he lives here in Albagnano. If someone is interested, it's still possible. Okay, end of the advertising. So he became Lama Ganchen's personal tanka. And Lama Ganchen, for example, in his bedroom, the main tanka in his bedroom is a kurukule, painted by Ducho. The point is that when we see someone with potential, even if it's full of defects, we try to highlight the potential and not the defects. And this is what we should do with our daily relationships, and not put our finger on the wound and start to pour salt on the wound and be sarcastic about the weakness of someone else. This is clear, isn't it? This next is Zhang Miguk, and the next one too, they go really together. Number 12, don't lie in ambush. And number 13, don't strike at the vital point or the weak point. So don't lie in ambush means, okay, you hurt me at some point, just wait. Sooner or later, it's going to be your turn. One is there waiting for the right moment to be able to hit back. Why? I mean, why do I need to hit someone because you were hit? Do you think you'll feel better? Is that going to cure you? No. Also, because let's recognize that the fundamental cause of our suffering is our aversion and resentment and hate, etc. And when we are there lying in ambush, what are we feeling? Gratitude and love? resentment, dissatisfaction, hate, anger. So don't do it. In other words, don't don't act. Don't wait for the right moment to hit back at someone. There is no right moment. There is to hit back at someone. Another example is, I know that an example would be, I know it's hard for you to speak in public, and then maybe you're there in front of lots of people, and then I talk specifically about that thing when you're in front of these people. So when someone acts with violence or aggression towards us, what can happen? When someone has a way of behaving that even if maybe without that intention, maybe we suffered from that behavior. We have wounds inside related to how other people have behaved. I think we all have this. So what should we do with that? Okay, so you hurt me, I need to hurt you back. What the least natural and the most beneficial would be to react with compassion, which doesn't mean I want to spend more time with you. Okay, why did you hurt me? If someone comes to us and hits us with a stick, I mean, who's to blame? The piece of the stick? Because I suffered, so I develop aversion towards who? Towards the stick? Am I going to get angry towards the stick? Someone would say, you're stupid. It's not the stick that hurts you, but that's the one that touched me, but it's not the primary cause. It was the tool that was used. So what should I get angry with? Should I get angry with the arm? Should I get angry with the movement? No, with the person. Well, what's behind that person? Why did that person do that? It's anger, it's ignorance that generated that. If I need to if I need to generate aversion to what actually hurt me, it's the ignorance of the other, it's the hate of the other, it's the anger of the other. And how can I oppose the selfishness and the anger of the other with more anger? No, with love. So because I want to destroy what hurt me, I need to generate the antidote. And what hurt me was not the person, but a behavior that came from an inner attitude. And here I take advantage to add a key point, which is never judge a person, but actually the behavior towards us and towards others. Never say that person is, or rather that behavior is. Ourselves, are we completely do we have behavior that's completely coherent, or always the same? Or do we have moments where we're kind, moments when we're envious and angry? I mean, we're coherent in our incoherence, let's say, with our and it's the same for everyone else. So if you are kind towards me, you are a kind person. And if you're unkind to someone else, that person would say, he is an unkind person. Well, are you kind or are you unkind? Neither one nor the other. You have you have nice behaviors and unkind behaviors, but you're a complex combination of things like everyone. So we should never judge the person and say this person is this or is that. Instead, we should judge behaviors. This way of speaking, this way of acting is harmful, and I want to oppose the behavior of that person, because if I oppose the person, then all yeah, I'm judging the person. But instead, if I judge the behavior, then I'm judging the behavior. And I say, okay, why is there this kind of behavior? Oh, because there's fear or this anger. So I don't want to destroy the person anymore. I want to destroy that type of behavior. Is that difference clear? Even towards ourselves. I mean, what am I? For example, you're a liar. What makes a person a liar? What defines someone? What defines someone as a liar? How many lies do you need to say before you are defined as a liar? One? Or is there, maybe like up to 100 lies? You're not really a liar, but then you become a liar. So what makes someone a liar? That tells lies. Is there anyone here who has never told a lie? And if someone raises his hand, I would think that he's telling a lie right now. I mean, so we're all liars? No one is a liar. There are those who tell more and those who tell fewer lies. It's not the person who is a liar or the person who is bad. The person is this or that. A person can have behavior that is hateful, but the person himself is not hateful. And so we need to direct our aversion, because we're made up of attraction and aversion, not towards the person, but towards the behavior. And the same thing for ourselves. I am not this. I have this trait and I have this other trait, and I need to cultivate what is good for me and abandon what is bad for me without generalizing. So for this, when we say, it says to don't lie in ambush, don't wait, wait for someone's Achilles heel to hurt. And another way to do this is to not victimize oneself. And together with this is number 13, don't strike at the vital point. Does it happen every once in a while to fight? I mean, ideally, one should take the vow to not fight. But should it ever happen, you should not strike at the vital point. It's happened where I was in a kind of argument with someone. We had two different ideas, and we started talking, and that discussion was a little stronger. I wouldn't let go of my point of view, and he didn't let go of his point of view. And then that person started telling me things that had nothing to do with the argument at hand, looking for weak points. And talking to that person later, I said, I was upset, not for what you told me, but for this fact that you really you looked for weak points to hurt me. So, I mean, we can have different points of view, and that's fine, but that you really looked for something specific, a specific weak point, to hurt me. And that person answered, but we were fighting, we were arguing. I mean, that's what arguing is about. Well, thanks for the lesson. No, we shouldn't do that. Should we ever be in conflict because we have different points of view, because we have different different ways of seeing things? This can happen. Do not look for weak points. Stay on topic. Is that easy or difficult? Depends on who and for what. But this is a fundamental point. Why do people take vows? It's like these white lines on the road. To protect ourselves when the day goes from sunny to cloudy. So in that moment of conflict where there's aversion starts to grow and grow, it becomes harder. And that's where we need to protect ourselves, remembering that we take a commitment. Should we ever find ourselves in conflict, we focus on the object of discussion and not look for weak points in someone else. And if someone else looks for weakness in me to hurt me, that's his problem. Because Shantideva said, if someone comes and hits me on the arm, what generated the pain in my arm? There are two parts. There's the movement of the actual stick and also the presence of my arm. If I move my arm around, the time that the person comes to hit me with this stick, there is no pain. So when someone hurts us physically, and then something else is when someone tries to hurt us mentally or verbally. If someone says something that I am not, or I don't think that I am, why should I get upset? Why should I allow this person to hit me verbally or mentally? I don't need that. If you want to act in that way, if you think this of me as I think differently of myself, which is normal to have two different points of view on the same thing. So if you say something to me that doesn't correspond to the way I see myself, then I just let it go and I don't let myself be hit. It's easier said than done, but let's remember the first. Let's think about the lesson that we should not do to others what we don't want done to ourselves. So if I don't want to be hit, then we should not hit others. If we find ourselves hit, we need to protect ourselves. We can move away. We can defend ourselves. But defending does not mean one thing is defense, another thing is a counterattack. And one of the attitudes that we have is, what is it? What's the term used? Americans use this in a war. This like defensive attack. Or preventive attack. It's not that they invented anything. I mean, this happens. I hit you before you can hit me. Unfortunately, the other person has a counterattack. So maybe you would never hit me, but I hit you, and so given that you hit me, and I'm gonna hit you again. So but let's forget about the great wars. I mean, look at our daily life. You speak ill of me, I speak ill of you. Maybe maybe you don't, maybe I speak badly of you and you don't hit me right away, but over time I collect resentment and then I will wait for that moment to hit back. So let's take this commitment to not strike at the vital point, not not strike at all, and especially not in the weak point. For example, we know, maybe we know, may that maybe we know a person has some issues, and then we wait for that person to be in public, and in front of everyone we highlight this problem that this person has, for example. Number 14.
Lama Michel. Non caricare il bue con il fardello di uno yak.
Don't burden an ox with the load of a dzo. Dzo. So in Italian it was translated as yak, but it's a dzo. The dzo is a cross between a cow and a yak. It's a very, very strong animal that can carry a lot of weight, even more than a normal ox. So don't burden. Don't burden an ox with the load of a dzo, which means don't put your responsibilities onto someone else. Don't put our so if I've done something that's not right, whose responsibility is that? It's my responsibility. Is it mine? It's not someone else's, is it? I always think of the story of the watermelon when I talk about this story. As some of you might remember this. One day I got home after a trip to Tibet. Here in Albagnano, I got home. Lama Ganchen wasn't there. I don't remember where he was. I get home and I go into the bathroom. I flush and the toilet is blocked. I tried to do something and it wasn't working. It was a Saturday or a Sunday. Anyway, it was a weekend. I called Vincenzi, who's a plumber friend that lives nearby, and I said, I'm in trouble. Can you come by? He very kindly came over. He cleaned the toilet and came out 3 huge rinds of watermelon. And he looked at me and said, what did you do? And I said, me, I just got back from a trip. I don't know anything. I didn't flush the watermelon rind down the toilet. And he said, you know, all of the craziest things that I've seen flushed down the toilet, and even if someone lives alone at home, it's never that person's fault, you know. And so I go to the only person that was in the house, and I said, did you eat any watermelon? No. Did someone come here who ate watermelon? No. So it was like it's just a case of like spontaneous materialization of watermelon rind in the toilet. You know how many times I've been in situations where things didn't go well, and then we ask, you know, oh, how did this happen? And it's always someone else's responsibility. Oh, it's not, I did my best. I have nothing to do with this. Instead, it's beautiful to take on responsibility. I remember once I was in India. Sincerely, I don't remember the specific context of what had happened, but I said something to one of my masters, Gen Lakpala, that generated a misunderstanding that created conflict between Gen Lakpala and one of my teachers, Geshe Chekawa. So that created a problem between the two of them. At a certain point, Geshe Lekman, he came to me quite upset to say, how did you allow yourself to say this and that? I mean, look at the problem that you've created. And when he came towards me, I had realized what had happened. And just before, even before he said this, I said, I did this, I said this, that, and the other. I wasn't aware of what was happening. I didn't know, and I created a problem. It's my responsibility, and I'm really sorry for what I've done. How can I help resolve the problem? And I remember that energetically, it's like he came with a big stick, and as I was talking, he just let it fall, energetically speaking. Because when one takes the responsibility of the error and puts his energy towards the solution, why hit him at that point? Why strike? I mean, even if the person doesn't do that, there's no reason to strike. When we make a mistake and we admit it openly, because we all make mistakes, it's normal. There's nothing wrong making mistakes. The problem is persisting, in the error. And when we openly admit our error, we take away all of the power of the mistake. Even just in our daily life, you just point out something, and then that person's always ready to say, "Oh, this person did that, and that person did this." I mean, we're always ready to be on the defensive and blame someone else or make someone else responsible for the mistake. And instead, and what you need a lot of maturity. It's beautiful to openly admit. So the point here, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I made a mess, and I'm the one that should clean it up. It's not because I made a mess that I make someone else clean it up. I take the commitment, or like I take a commitment to do something and I make someone else do it. Like an example would be on a practical level, I take a commitment to do something at a certain point. I don't feel like it. I have something else to do. I let go and I give it to someone else. And that person that person needs to pick up and do the thing that I had promised to do. In that case, I am burdening an ox with the load of it, so I'm giving. It's pass the buck. In English, we say pass the buck. Don't pass the buck. Don't put onto others our errors or our own responsibilities. Looking for defects in others to hide our own. Instead, it's beautiful to be able to openly admit our errors and to say, okay, yes, I did this. It would have been better if I had done it differently. I totally agree. Now now we know. Why should I get defensive? When we have behavior that we think is maybe not the right thing to do, or in front of judgment of someone else, I mean, does it help to become defensive? Often it makes us repeat that same behavior again. Instead, when we admit and say, I made a mistake, then we purify, and cleaning helps me not repeat that. So when we admit something, it takes away the weight, even on a karmic level. This action, this inertia of the action that we've done, when we openly admit it, it becomes weaker. So the point here is not putting our own responsibilities onto someone else. So the responsibility of our own errors shouldn't be thrown onto someone else. In other words, be responsible for your own actions, for your own commitments, and your own errors. Okay? It's number 15.
Tolok micha. Tolok micha lojon redun duwada. Nöba shije. Chongcho sogiche. Gomba töcho lokba michas.
Don't abuse the practice. Don't abuse the practice is something that for most of us in this context we don't need to worry about, in the sense that it's not part of our social cultural context to use our spiritual practices for mundane reasons. For example, I mean, we could too, if we wanted. I use Lojong practice to in the Tibetan tradition, in the Tibetan context, or the pujas is used. So I use this practice because a person is sick or needs something. So I do this ceremony. That person makes an offering to me, and I earn something with that. So that would be a way to abuse the practice. Other ways of abusing the practice would be I use the Lojong teachings for material, mundane reasons of like material reasons, or for my own image, or I learn the Lojong practice so that I could then go organize courses and teach Lojong to make money. That would be a way of abusing the practice. I can abuse the practice once I use the practice to show that I'm better than someone else. To try to have image, recognition, power. These are ways of abusing power, using it for something that is not at all its own, its real, its real.
Gyokitse mitös. Ngososo kang gyokis hartop chebe gyokitse mitös. Non voler vincere a tutti i costi.
It says, don't sprint to win the race. Don't try to be the first of the class. Don't try to be the Buddha in a weekend. I mean, we're here to walk all together. We don't need to be the best one to practice the mental mind training, or the fastest, the best. I think this. I think more than don't sprint to win the race, don't try to be the first of the class, because being a good practitioner is not our objective. Our objective is to practice well. And sometimes when we get into a certain context, there's this kind of competition and need to do more and to be the best. And so I do more. I do Tonlen practice, and I try somehow to obtain results in a short term to get recognition too. I don't need to do that. Also, because there's no hurry to get there. There's hurry to walk in the right direction, but not to get there. So we shouldn't try to run to get somewhere. We need to walk according to the length of our own legs. And we see, we finish one mountain and then there's another one. of one of my masters, Geshe Rinpoche. When he left Tibet walking, he said that it was very difficult. But the two metaphors that he applied, he said that in life, you never know if you are getting to the top of a mountain or not. You know that you're at the summit of a mountain only once you've gotten there. Because if you're walking and walking, I mean, well, you can't really see the top. You see it only once you're actually on top, and you never know how many mountains there are. You never know if it's the last mountain or not. So there's no hurry. Every mountain should be faced and the ones that came before will help you on the one that you're climbing now, and then the ones that are going to come after. There's no hurry. So there's no hurry of being the first one or being the best disciple or the best Buddhist. We should not have any competition for who is the best disciple, the best practitioner. These things can happen, so we should talk about it. 16. 17.
Quindi non voler vincere a tutti i costi.
So don't transform gods into devils. Don't turn gods into devils. The gods represent things that are positive, virtuous, sacred, and devils or demons is the embodiment of negativity. So how can I transform gods into demons? In this case, gods is the spiritual practice, meditation, study of philosophy, the mind training. All of these practices are the gods, the virtuous things that can be transformed into devils when instead of feeding altruism, they actually feed our selfishness. If at a certain point I allow the practice of altruism, this practice actually nourishes my selfishness, there's something wrong. I don't know if you're able to picture this. How can I use a practice that is there to eliminate selfishness that ends up actually feeding my self? How can a practice that should be there to nourish our altruism actually feed our selfishness? If I think I'm better than you because I am more humble. This reminds me of Roberto Benigni. Once I heard him say that humbleness is the hardest of all qualities because it's enough to think that you are humble to no longer be so. So that see what we mean by being humble, but in this context, he's absolutely right. So when our spiritual practices, where our objective is to diminish our selfishness and open up our hearts, but this act of generosity and love and compassion and taking care of others is something that actually that nourishes our ego and blows up our ego. We're transforming gods into demons. And unfortunately, it's easy to fall into this trap. So for this, we need to be really careful, observe, always come back to understand. I mean, do I want to be the one who loves, or do I want to love you? The question is, what's my objective? The one who loves, or do I want you to be happy? Every once in a while, I see one gets angry and says, with all the love I have for you, and you're not happy. Oh, if it depended on you, it'd be easier, no? But it doesn't. No? So it's very important to have this sincerity, this clarity, this deep coherence, and be very, very careful. I mean, these are traps that we can easily fall into. So maybe something that has a virtuous or spiritual reason for being becomes something mundane. And we should ask ourselves why we do this thing. For example, in this act of of giving and helping others, it's easy to fall into the trap where we become the one who wants to help. For example, I have a position that is extremely dangerous. It's not easy because it's very easy. It's the position to guide, to teach, etc. And what one receives in exchange is beautiful. It's very easy to fall into the trap where I start nourishing my own ego. For what I receive, I am the master, and these are my disciples, and I'm called in this way. We need to really, really be careful. So what we want is to develop our qualities to be of service to others, to help others. We don't want to be better than anyone else. We don't want to be recognized for one thing or another. When we see that we start getting into certain dynamics, then we need to cut it, not allow it to happen. I've had various experiences where I watch that danger come by. One needs to really go round it and escape it. For this, so we should absolutely not turn gods into devils. Try to make sure that our spiritual path keeps nourishing the growth of our qualities. If instead it starts nourishing our arrogance or sense of superiority, at that point we are really turning gods into devils. And when gods are turned into devils, often they're killed. It's important to turn them back from devils into gods. Instead, they need to be regenerated. I don't know if this is clear. No, it's not like, oh, okay. You know, one needs to start again from the absolute beginning. So don't turn gods into devils. The last one. Don't seek others' misery as a means to happiness. At this point, number 18, there's a little bit of interpretation here that's important. There's a difference where I use someone else's suffering to reach my own personal objective, a personal objective. So somehow my happiness uses a state of malaise and suffering of someone else. And there are many codependencies that are similar, situations, even on a material level, where So for me to be able to live at a certain level, I need to depend on others who live in another state. In our society, in all societies, I mean, just look around. This is possible for this to happen. For example, it comes to my mind, people who sell products that we would never use because we know that that they're harmful. And this falls perfectly here. I have a personal objective using basically others' suffering. Oh, but they're free to buy what they buy or not buy. But we know that it's harmful what we're selling. Or if I say, or for me to get what I want, someone needs to suffer. So we continue these dynamics so that I get what I want, you know. So I know that this other person, I know that for this person is in a suffering state, is there these kinds of addictions, and then that allows me to get what I want. And the other part is when our lifestyles, there are one or more people who 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 don't they don't agree and they suffer in front of our choices. I'll give you a personal example. When I was 11, 12 years old, when I chose to go live in India and study Buddhism and follow this life, this path that was given to me, there were some people like my grandparents who weren't happy. They were worried. Years later, they thanked Lama Ganchen, and they really understood it was something that I needed. But it took some years. It wasn't so easy. So I was doing something that gave me a lot of joy, and I felt really good. But there were people near me that suffered for what I was doing. So in this case, am I looking for others' misery as a means to be happy? No, because my happiness doesn't depend on their suffering. So one thing is that one is not able to live, to digest what I'm doing. And then another thing is for me to be able to do what I'm doing, it depends on someone else's suffering, their sickness, or their addiction. I don't know if this difference is clear. So we need to really protect. We need to protect other people from their suffering and try to avoid situations that could create suffering for others. There's no solution or situation that will make everyone happy. Buddha Shakyamuni had his cousin named Devadatta, and the story says that he tried to kill him 5 times. He was very, very envious of him, and he actually became a monk and tried to create division in the spiritual community. He tried to obtain power. He did many, many things. So Buddha, the person with the perfect state of like pure balance, who lived with him, we can make a long list of people who had tremendous love, like Jesus, for example. When we do something, when we act in a way to make everyone agree and everyone happy with the way we act, that's impossible. And the other extreme of using other people's suffering and use mechanisms that actually generate suffering in others for one's own happiness, for one's own objectives. This is something totally, totally wrong. And here we're talking about the environment. We're talking about substances that are harmful, or like abusing migrant labor or child labor. I remember once a young girl came to me. Now many years have gone by. She came to me to talk to me because she had problems with abuse, drug abuse. This was in Brazil, and she wasn't able to stop. And talking with her at the time, a film had just come out in Brazil called Troppo Gelice. Troppo Delice. It shows in this movie the reality behind drug trafficking, all the violence, etc., with the police involved. Once talking to a friend in Brazil, someone was part of this elite police officers. I asked him if this movie corresponded to reality, and he said that the reality is much worse. So talking to this girl, I understood that telling her that that substance was bad for her was not the right road. So I asked her, when you buy this, or when you you go to get it, behind it, is there suffering? In other words, every time that you smoke, every time you smoke a joint, how much blood is behind that? How much suffering is behind that? And that was the key to get her to stop. Because the point is, it's the same thing, like, for example, the problems we have today that have to do with meat and many other things. There are certain types of products that abuse the workers. So the fact that the animal dies is the last of the problem. It's how the animal is actually raised, how they live their lives. This is the real problem. And then there are environmental problems, etc. But the real problem is the amount of violence that is behind these farms. So to have something that's pleasurable for me, is there suffering behind that? This is what should be avoided. The choices that so for me to get that pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with that little bit of pleasure that I'm getting, but to get that pleasure, is there suffering behind getting that object? And here we have, like child labor, or the abuse of animals or the environment. So in this vow today, from my point of view, this really should be about being an aware consumer. Because when I go to buy something, I'm responsible. I have a responsibility. It's like every time I buy something, it's like voting, and there's a responsibility behind that. I'm not involved in the whole in the whole production of it, but I'm very much part of this process. So we need to be very careful. The choices we make, the things we consume, the things we buy, do they depend on the suffering of others or not? Because for this to be like this, let's give an example. For example, if I were to choose what kind of energy, so now energy is really expensive. Let's say a company comes along and they sell the energy at 1/3 the price, but they did it because they took slaves, and these slaves need to go on bicycles for 24 hours a day, and they're creating this energy that then costs less. Sorry, this. When there was that time where people were doing this home delivery by bicycle, um, and there was some of them were accused of not paying, and they were saying, "Oh, well, we actually are letting them do sporting activity." So I say, well, I pay my bill, I turn on the light, I, you know, um, so, or maybe there's another company that burns up people's homes to get energy, but that's not my problem. I'm paying for my bills, I turn on my lights. No, but we're connected, we're not disconnected. So when we buy something, it's important to observe what is behind. I mean, what is that costing? What is costing for the planet beyond my own pockets? What's the cost to society? So this commitment seems simple, but it's actually quite complex, and one could say, well, I have a correct life. I try not to generate suffering in others. My objective is the well-being of myself and society. But if we start to look a little bit more deeply and look at the interdependence in our lives, then it becomes very important. And I give this up to each one's own discernment. If this one thing cannot exist without the suffering of others, then that is something that is actually seeking others' misery as a means to our own happiness, inevitably. So here one needs a lot of awareness here, an attitude of real altruism, serious. Let go of what is more convenient for us and really look for what is of the common good. And I know with this we touch some painful spots, some sore spots. And the point is never about judging someone, but judging behavior, what is good for others. And where we see that there's a chain of aggressive behavior, and if we feed that chain, we're feeding violence. This is one of the main points. And in my personal case, one of the main reasons where I chose to not be part of that chain of relative to animals. I mean, more than 90% of the animals in the world are cows, chickens, and pigs that are imprisoned in frightening conditions. So how much a part are you of that system? How much are you feeding that system? Okay. Well, you say I like it. Okay, well, if you like it, that's another. I mean, there are many, many different ways of judging. And with this, I'm not saying that those who eat meat are bad. I'm saying just observe your own conscience and try to be the positive interdependence, the most positive possible. There, in the Tibetan tradition, there are different visualizations and practices to create a connection with the animal. And if one does this with a certain attitude, then it has a certain result. If it's just an excuse to be able to eat as much meat as one wants, then it's another result. And so how we do things is important. But the most important point here is about not nourishing conduct that is based on other people's or other beings' suffering. We shouldn't base our happiness on others' misery. We depend on others' misery for our happiness. If there are many of us, for example, and if the amount of food is little, I can't satiate myself, and letting everyone else go hungry. To be able to eat so much, someone else needs to eat less. Instead, let's share among us. Maybe we're not totally full, but no one goes hungry. And another topic would be, someone getting upset because I'm eating something that one is not able to eat. But we should not use things that generate suffering in others as a means to our happiness. I think I've exhausted myself here in explaining this point. We could talk about this for hours, but I think it's clear now. So to conclude, tomorrow we'll look at the precepts. They're really beautiful. The point here, please reread these commitments and ask yourself, are there some that are important and useful? Are they guidelines that you want to give to yourself? And if they are, then apply them, because life goes by and we don't have time to waste with conflicts and jealousies, and we need to go forward to the best of our abilities, and let's set clear guidelines that we should follow. The beauty of these commitments, even if they were written in the 11th century in Tibet, they are actual. Here we are, centuries and centuries later, and they're modern. They're applicable to our daily life today. I'd like to thank you for your attention, for the fact of being here together, and something really beautiful that's there too. Among us, we influence ourselves in every aspect, and even in positive aspects. The more people who are able to react in a certain way, the easier it becomes for others to act in that same way. So when we have a virtuous conduct in our life, whether we're aware of it or not, we are supporting others to have a virtuous conduct. So simply living our small life based on love and respect and altruism in a virtuous way, that's an incentive. It's a very positive investment that we do for everyone around us, and this has great power. We can talk. There are different theories and such, but the point is that we each influence those around us, and the more solid a certain conduct is, the easier it is for others to be influenced positively by that. So when we see these commitments and we try to apply them in our lives, it's also a way to help others do the same. So it's time for our dedications, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll pick up again tomorrow morning at 10:30.
Lame kutse rapten chi nam kratin le chokchurge drome sasumge drowe munsela takto ne gyurchi kewa kunto yanda lama dan drame cheki pela longche ching Sadan lamge yönde rabzone dorje change kopa nyur tobe sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshi pe kuncho sumke jingi loba kuncho sumke ngodrubo tsol kuncho sumke trashe sho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or during the day, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Thank you, everyone. And we'll continue tomorrow morning at 10:30. Just one more thing. If you have a possibility today to read at least a couple times what we've looked at today and what we'll see tomorrow, that really helps if you can read it a couple times, even without understanding all of the precepts of mental training. When we explain tomorrow, it'll be easier to connect. Thank you.